Hi, I'm Shay Anderson, and today I'll be focusing on strategy number 6 from the Integrating Language Arts and Social Studies text by Leah Melber and Alice Hunter, using personally relevant history to engage students in learning about the history of their community and integrate social studies and language arts in any classroom or grade level. I will be presenting an example of this strategy by exploring the history of Dillon, Montana. Starting off, I would like to introduce the strategy by explaining what personally relevant history is. A personal history is often the story of a life or from a life. It can be a memoir, a tribute, a life story, an autobiography, a biography, or an oral history. That is someone's personal history, but what is personally relevant history? This is being able to relate to someone's personal history or the history of any subject to your life by making connections to your own life experiences or knowledge. We are able to use someone's personal history in the strategy of personally relevant history by reading their stories and connecting to them. Personally relevant history in relation to a strategy of integrating language arts and social studies in the classroom is that students are able to relate to stories, images, or books, make connections with the past, teachers are able to provide inquiry, and students will spend time thinking about it and creating questions and therefore building their knowledge. The essential questions that I want to emphasize throughout my presentation and when teaching students with this strategy is: how has our community of Dillon developed since its establishment? Why is it important that we learn the history of where we live? What will happen to our community as it continues to develop? How will the town change, and in what ways? Essential questions are important to determine before introducing the subject to students so that we can learn what their knowledge is already, get students to start to think about the subject, and to refer back on as the lesson progresses to make sure students are on track. Essential questions help bring inquiry into a social studies lesson by making students dive deeper into the material during the class and outside of class. The ILAS book has chosen specific standards for the English language arts. The standards that they have chosen for this strategy is that students will develop writing and oral language skills through the analysis process. Standard 1 states that students will read a wide range of print and non-print texts to build an understanding of texts themselves and of the cultures of the United States and the world, to acquire new information, to respond to the needs and demands of society in the workplace, and for personal fulfillment. Among these texts are fiction and nonfiction, classic and contemporary works. Strategy 2 states that students apply a wide range of strategies to comprehend, interpret, evaluate, and appreciate texts. They draw on their prior experience and their interactions with other readers and writers, their knowledge of word meaning and of other texts, their word identification strategies, and their understanding of textual features. Personally relevant history can be a path into many different NCSS themes. The National Council for the Social Studies has curriculum standards for social studies, and personally relevant history helps to fulfill 3 different strands. These strands being strand number 2, time, continuity, and change, strand number 3, people, places, and environment, and strand number 4, individual development and identity. The key themes throughout the activity that students will be doing throughout their research are making observations, analyzing pictures, comparing and contrasting, inferring from visual images, and hypothesizing. How does personally relevant history fit into Montana Common Core social studies standards? When looking at the 5th grade requirements for the activities that the students will do, their research on personally relevant history will meet for sure these 2 standards, if not more. The history content standards for 5th grade are that each student will understand their interrelationship of chronological historical events, and the geography content standards for 5th grade are that each student will analyze environmental and technological events and conditions, and how humans and the environment impact each other with relation to settlements and migration. How might you use a strategy of personally relevant history by teaching about Dillon, Montana history? Since we all live in Dillon, and let's say if we were teachers in Dillon, most of our students will be growing up in this community, so learning more about where we live can be fun. Students can study the community in the past through reading historical records, personal letters, talking to older generations, and looking through high school yearbooks. I have found some great resources into Dillon history that I have included in my 2-pager. Teachers can obtain these resources easily by working with the local historical society, consulting with newspaper archives, and purchase old pictures and postcards. With these materials and resources, a great activity for students to do is to compare and contrast the materials. This is very beneficial because students will reflect on how and why people create and change their towns to meet the needs of the inhabitants, think about how outside forces have affected the town. Studying old photographs can be very interesting, and images are a great way to look at different time periods and make conclusions. One of the most important instructional strategies when teaching is to create inquiry-based learning. By using personally relevant history and social studies, any teacher, no matter the grade level or town, teacher could ask the questions, what will happen to our community as it continues to develop? How will the town change, and in what ways? We can engage students into this inquiry-based learning about Montana history by having the students attend a field trip and have them imagine themselves in that area at a moment in time. They can journal the questions that they think of. We can have students take their own photos of places that they recognize are of their interest or would like to study more. They develop questions by analyzing the images. They can record an interview with an older local citizen or family member to pose questions, get answers, and create further questions. Or, students can create timelines of different aspects of history and develop questions through the research process. Some questions related to the NCSS themes that can help students really dig deeper into different time periods in history are, what was life like during this time period? How has life in the community changed from older photographs to the one from today? Are there trees, roads, cars, houses, churches, monuments, or buildings in the picture? Can you guess what year or time period the photograph was taken? Does the image look like a place you already know? This would be an example of how students could use old images and compare them with the new ones that they take themselves or find, as well as analyzing images for familiar places. On the left, we have two pictures of the Metland Hotel, one from 1990 and one from 2012. There are a lot of different details that students could look at in these images to distinguish how things have changed. The images on the right are great for finding familiar buildings. Going on to how to relate personally relevant history to learning about the history of Montana, here I have found a resource for each NCSS theme. The first book is a nonfiction book called Montana, A History of Our Home by Martha Cole. This book would fit into the strand 2, Time, Continuity, and Change, because it ranges from different time periods in Montana and many different events and changes. The next is a National Register of Historic Places Inventory Nomination Form. These archives of different historic places can be found on the Montana Historical Society website and is a great resource to learn about the historical places around you or involving a student's area of interest. This would be an example of Strand 3, People, Places, and Environment, because it talks about who was a part of the historical place and the environment. Last is the biography of Sarah Gammon Bickford, found on Women's History Matters website. This would be a great resource for Strand 4, Individual Development and Identity, because Sarah Gammon took a role in the city and development of Virginia City, which some students may be familiar of. Other resources would be Montana, the Magazine of Western History, which showcases the people, places, and events that shaped the state in the western region. The Montana Historical Society presents many different resources that students can use, such as material that is specific to Montana, including biographies, magazines, books, and images. How might you include IEFA content into this teaching? It is extremely important that we integrate IEFA into our social studies instruction so that students are educated on the heritage of American Indians and are able to understand and be aware of the Indian tribes in relation to their state and country. In the 1972 Constitution, the state of Montana recognized the distinct and unique cultural heritage of American Indians and committed to provide education preserving the cultural integrity of each Montana tribe. 27 years later, in 1999, the legislature passed the House Bill in 528 into the law we now call Indian Education for All. In part, the law reads as follows: every Montanan, whether Indian or non-Indian, be encouraged to learn about the distinct and unique heritage of American Indians in a culturally responsive manner. All school personnel should have an understanding and awareness of Indian tribes to help them relate effectively with Indian students and parents. Every educational agency and all educational personnel will work cooperatively with Montana tribes when providing instruction and implementing an educational goal. I think a great way for students to learn about the history of their town as well as incorporate IEFA into instruction is to include the study of the Beaverhead Rock. Many students have probably driven by it or seen it off the road, and if they haven't, it is a short drive out of town to visit. The story of the Beaverhead Rock. The Beaverhead Rock plays a significant part in Sacagawea's journey with Lewis and Clark. She was from the Shoshone tribe and had been traveling with the Corps of Discovery for 5 years after her abduction. She began to recognize features of the landscape as they began to approach the land of the Shoshone. In 1805, Lewis recorded that Sacagawea began to recognize the country and assured them that this is where her relations lived. On August 8th, she saw the Beaverhead Rock and she knew she was home. Producing inquiry and making connections to social studies and language arts standards when studying the Beaverhead Rock, students could participate in a field trip to the Beaverhead Rock and the Beaverhead Rock State Park, make connections with students of Native American backgrounds or families, have discussions about Lewis and Clark as well as Sacagawea's journey through Montana, and read about their journey. For this strategy, there are grade level modifications in order to meet the developmental needs of all students of different levels. In a K through 2nd grade class, it is developmentally appropriate for students to take pictures of the now. Teachers can also take pictures themselves for students to see. The whole class could do a comparing and contrasting project on images together, and the activity can be tailored so that it relates to sites that are closest to the students, such as school or home. For 3rd through 5th graders, students at this age are still enjoying taking pictures, but they should be challenged to write a short story about being alive during the time of the first photograph and explaining what they did in school, what they did to have fun, and what was their town like, who was their family, and so forth. Another short story topic is to write about being alive during the time of the first photo and being suddenly transported to the picture from today. For 6th through 8th graders, after the learners view the older pictures, they can be challenged to draw what they think the scene looks like today, then go to the scene and see how accurate their depiction is. These students could still use cameras to take pictures of the present-day location. Students could be asked to write an essay comparing and contrasting the two images. The essay should include why they believe the changes between the two photographs took place. The students might also need to conduct some outside research to complete the assignment. This strategy also has ways to meet the needs of English learners. This activity promotes visual literacy and competence in all learners. Students who are learning English can be successful even if they do not have fluent writing skills. They can talk about each picture and the relationship between the two images, and talking translation dictionaries can be provided to assist learners with new vocabulary to use in speaking and writing. Some activities may need to be differentiated or accommodations may need to be made for students. We also have ways to meet the needs of students with special needs. These students can still take pictures or speak about pictures given to them. They can create their own illustrations to depict original as well as the newer scene. They can draw a representation of how the image has changed, and they can also use technology to enlarge the picture. Upon assessing these activities, the students will be able to analyze photographs in a deliberate manner that encourages visual literacy and competence, compare and contrast images from different time periods, and make inferences about the cause of the differences. So, how can teachers effectively support K-8 learners in conducting true inquiries into social studies topics, concepts, and questions while simultaneously helping them develop and apply language arts skills? Teachers can effectively support K-8 learners by introducing opportunities to study in the student's area of interest, scaffolding the process by adding in relevant resources and learning opportunities to the student's experiences and knowledge. Teachers can create inquiry by asking students themselves or guiding students into creating their own questions of interest. By creating inquiry, students will delve deeper than what's in the books by learning about the history that they may be interacting with every day in their community. During this research, students will be developing and applying language arts skills through their reading and writing and communicating with others to collect information and share it. To conclude, personally relevant history is a great strategy of instructing language arts with social studies. While it is flexible and has a wide range of resources, it also creates relationships within the community and a learning environment that is engaging and exciting for each student. Personally relevant history is a way to get students interacting with the history of their town or where they have spent a lot of time. By letting students take lead in their discovery process, it gets students on their feet in directing themselves and the research. By creating interactive and engaging learning, it helps the history material go from boring to being an adventure. As students, it is our job to bring the classroom to life, and by using personally relevant history as a strategy, standards are still being met. Options of instruction are endless. Students use a higher level of thinking and deeper knowledge, creates inquiry, and is full of adventure.